worthwhile doing. Politically, I think the country is completely behind the president and his tough approach to China. And in fact, as you know, leading Democrats such as Senator Schumer and others have supported the president in this battle. So I think sometimes you can do the right thing. And in a sense, this is a bipartisan policy, and it's long overdue.
Well, last week, the U.S. Commerce Department announced the trade deficit with China is now at a 5-year low. Well, the Socialists unite tonight. 2020 hopeful Bernie Sanders teaming up with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for a Green New Deal rally. The event at Howard University in Washington, D.C. will highlight progressive proposals to stop climate change. Last week, Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez introduced their Loan Shark Prevention Act together to combat predatory lending practices. Well, this is the way you win a game, or Game 7 in the NBA playoffs. Take a look at this. Did you see it?
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger?
The action was about as good as the shot. It bounced 4 times, but Kawhi Leonard's shot went in, lifting the Raptors over the 76ers 92-90. They advance to play the Bucks, and the Trailblazers go on the road, and they beat the Nuggets 100-96 in Game 7. They will play the Warriors in the next round, which means they're facing off with Steph Curry, so don't know how that'll go. But, man, that game-beating buzzer shot was something else. Excitement. Well, the time now is about 12 minutes after the top of the hour, and he's already charged with training kids to become terrorists in New Mexico. And now he may be behind another terror compound. So how does this happen on American soil? Former intel officer Don Bramer says that those remote areas are a perfect breeding ground for terror. He joins us live up next. You don't want to miss it. Fox and Friends first, 15 minutes after the top of the hour. An Islamic terror compound uncovered on American soil. In a search warrant, the FBI describing the property as, quote, a makeshift military-style obstacle course. It's reportedly owned by Siraj Wahaj, the man already charged with training children in New Mexico to commit school shootings. Do you remember that? So how does this happen in America? Joining me now is former intelligence officer and Iraq veteran Don Bramer. Don, thank you so much for joining us on such an important topic this morning.
Good morning, Heather. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, but this is such a disturbing story, discovering this compound in Macon County, Alabama. And it's not the only one, apparently, that's out there. What can you tell us?
Well, you're right. This is not the only one. If you'll remember, Siraj Wahid was arrested earlier this year in New Mexico for doing the exact same thing, setting up a military-style terrorist training camp. In that case in New Mexico, he had 11 children that he was training to do school-style shootings. Now, here we are in Alabama, Tuskegee, a small town of about 18,000 residents who had no idea this was going on behind them. What's ironic to me that just shortly up the road, it's the home of Huda Mathana, who you'll remember was the runaway ISIS bride.
Interesting. So located where she was raised or where her family is?
Correct. Who they now have a lawsuit against the U.S. government for not allowing her back in the United States.
So there are currently, what I understand, 850 open domestic terrorism investigations currently underway in America.
That's correct. And part of that is because we have many, many cases of terrorists who are disguising themselves as refugees. You know, earlier just last week, there was another report of an ISIS-style training camp just 8 miles into New Mexico across the border, and then also near Waco, Texas, where they found prayer rugs, plans to Fort Bliss, Fort Hood, and other things that led them into the United States.
So why do these training camps, how are they allowed to exist? We find out about them. Do we immediately dismantle them? What happens?
Well, I think in the case where we look at New Mexico and Alabama, the one thing they have in common is they are both very rural areas that pretty much you only have to get through interstate. You can slip in and out very easy. Many people are private. They tend to their own business, and that's the type of places that these activities are looking to set up shop. It's easy to go unnoticed.
You know, it concerns me, though, because you talk about New Mexico and Siraj Wahaj, allegedly involved in this training camp as well, was not originally charged and brought in. I mean, it took some time. He and 4 others now have been indicted on terrorism, kidnapping, and firearm charges. But he moved from New Mexico and then was allowed for this to continue as well in Alabama.
Well, if you look at this case, you know, before being charged in New Mexico, he allegedly kidnapped his own son in Georgia just prior. That possibly was the body of the young 3-year-old child that was found in a shallow grave in New Mexico. Now, the one thing about Siraj that's very interesting, he's the son of a very well-known and vocal cleric in Brooklyn who is often against the United States, and incidentally was a suspect in the 1993 World Trade Center bombings.
Don, I pulled an article. It was the Washington Post, and they were basically making fun of something that President Trump had said during one of his events in New Hampshire. I think it was during the campaign. He talked about terrorist training camps. The Washington Post called that a conspiracy theory. But now we see at least 2 occasions, 3 that you've mentioned today, that this was an actual reality, and he knew what he was talking about. In that speech, he talked about 22 or some 35 different training camps all over the country.
You know, that's absolutely possible. You know, you look across the United States, there's a lot of land that people go unnoticed to. It's very easy to set up shop, whether it's domestic terrorism or ISIS or any other small sleeper cells. You can go by in your own neighborhood and operate very nefariously, and many people just won't notice. You know, many years ago, we were very diligent post 9/11. We noticed these things, and I think we've gotten a little lax. We've gotten lazy, if you will.
So that's the lesson. Yeah, Don, we're out of time, but, you know, pay attention is what the message is here. Don, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. A pilot could make his first court appearance today after being charged in a triple murder. In 2016, Christian Martin told a Kentucky news station that he suspected one of the victims of having an affair with his wife, but denied a role in the killings. Well, the former Army helicopter pilot was arrested on a plane moments before takeoff at the Louisville airport Friday. He works for the American Airlines subsidiary PSA Airlines. Well, a police sergeant, an Army veteran, is shot and killed in the line of duty. Kelvin Ansari gunned down while approaching a robbery suspect in Savannah, Georgia.
We lost a great man. We lost a man who spent a substantial portion of his life protecting our country and protecting our community. We lost a husband. We lost a father. We lost a leader.
Ansari joined the Savannah PD after serving in the Army for 21 years. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. And this picture from 2015, Ansari wrote, he always felt the need to serve other people. Ansari, by the way, is the 17th police officer shot and killed this year. We remember those fallen heroes as National Police Week gets underway. Attorney General Bill Barr kicking off the event in Washington and joking about his friction with Congress.
Thank you very much. That's a nicer reception than I get on Capitol Hill, I have to say. I've been Attorney General now for less than 3 months, and I haven't been able to get out of Washington. But once I deal with this Beltway silliness, you'll be seeing me.
Barr will attend a vigil for fallen officers tonight in D.C. Well, a Navy SEAL rejected by the FDNY for being too old is getting job offers from all around the country. More than a dozen fire departments reaching out to 37-year-old Sean Donovan, including San Francisco and Denver. Donovan scored in the top 1% on the FDNY entrance exam, but he was told that he was 6 months too old to join the force. The Iraq and Afghanistan war vet is appealing his disqualification. At 37 years old, come on. Well, the time now is about 26 minutes after the top of the hour, and former Defense Secretary Robert Gates slamming Joe Biden's foreign policy record.
You said in your memoir, I think he's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
I stand by that statement.
So should that be a red flag for voters? Our political panel on deck to debate it. Half past the top of the hour. Welcome back. A look at our top headlines for you this morning. An Islamic terror compound uncovered on American soil. In a search warrant, the FBI described the property as, quote, a makeshift military-style obstacle course. It's reportedly owned by the same man already charged with training children to commit school shootings in New Mexico. Senator Lindsey Graham planning to introduce a new immigration package this week. It includes increasing the amount of time minors can be held by border officials from 20 to 100 days, and for more immigration judges to reduce the backlog of asylum cases. And stock futures are plunging as investors brace for China to retaliate against U.S. tariffs. Beijing could respond as early as today after President Trump more than doubled the tariff rate on $200 billion worth of goods on Friday. And trade talks between the two nations ended last week with no deal. Well, Congresswoman Rashid Tlaib under fire after saying that thinking about the Holocaust gives her a, quote, calming feeling. Republicans are calling the comment sickening and demanding Democratic leadership take action. Aisha Husney is here with Tlaib's response. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, the Michigan Democrat was talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on a Yahoo News podcast when this happened. Listen.
There's a kind of a calming feeling, I always tell folks, when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, the human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out on some people's passport. I mean, just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy and horrific persecution of Jews across the world at that time.
Okay, so Democratic leaders, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi, haven't said anything about the comments just yet, but this has set off a firestorm of criticism from GOP House leadership. Liz Cheney called Tlaib's comments sickening and went on to say this, quote, all of us, regardless of party, must stand as Americans against the evil of anti-Semitism. If the Democratic leadership continues to stand by in silence, they are enabling the spread of evil. History teaches us that anti-Semitism begins with words and becomes something far worse. Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer must act now. Now, Tlaib and her team trying to explain her comments now. A spokesperson said Tlaib did not in any way praise the Holocaust, nor did she say the Holocaust itself brought a calming feeling to her. In fact, she repeatedly called the Holocaust a tragedy and a horrific persecution of Jewish people. Tlaib, along with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, as you know, have become a lightning rod for critics who have accused her of promoting anti-Semitic activists and rhetoric.
Yeah, so a lot of people immediately had response to this.
Absolutely. So we asked all of you out there what you think about the Congresswoman's comments, and most of you said they're inappropriate. So take a look at what Jeanne said on Facebook. She wrote, her comments are repulsive, and it's clear that either Pelosi has absolutely no control over the House members or she shares their beliefs. And a viewer on Instagram said this, she needs to be removed. And another person said, the real question is, how did anyone like this get elected to any form of government in America? Beyond disgusting. So much more comments to come, I'm sure.
It's interesting that they continue to perhaps stoke the fires a little bit. Maybe they should take a break with this topic for a little bit. I don't know.
We'll see.
But let us know what you think. Continue to send your comments. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, now we're going to talk about Joe Biden. He is headed to New Hampshire today for his first official campaign stops in the battleground state. But the 2020 frontrunner's foreign policy track record taking a hit from former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. Listen.
You said in your memoir, I think he's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
I stand by that statement. I think that the vice president had some issues with the military.
So should Biden's foreign policy failures worry voters? Here to debate it is senior writer for the Heritage Foundation and visiting fellow for the Independent Women's Forum, Kelsey Bolar, and member of the Virginia House of Delegates, Mark Levine. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So as we begin, since we're going to be talking about what Biden has had to say, let's listen to some of what he said on China and Russia.
China is going to eat our lunch. Come on, man. Governor Romney's answer, I thought, was incredibly revealing. He acts like he thinks the Cold War is still on. Russia is still our major adversary. I don't know where he's been.
China, Russia, don't worry about it, Kelsey. Don't worry about it.
Right. Those recent comments on China were quite bizarre, especially given the tough trade negotiations that are underway right now. But look, Joe Biden's foreign policy track record should absolutely be front and center on his campaign. And you don't have to go back 4 decades to actually see how problematic it is. Everything that President Trump is being criticized for by Democrats really bubbles down to rhetoric. They don't like Trump's rhetoric when it comes to Russia. But the fact of the matter, as Gates points out, is the Trump administration has been far tougher on Russia than any other administration in the past, including sanctions. And then if you look what the Obama administration's policy was towards Russia, where Joe Biden served as vice president, Crimea was taken over, and the Russia meddling actually began under the Obama administration. They were warned about that and did nothing. We have Ukraine, too. So that's just one example where I think his foreign policy track record is going to be center stage in the debate here.
You know, Mark, you're laughing, but former Assistant Secretary of State for President George W. Bush was on Fox, Robert Charles, and he pointed out that, in terms of Biden's foreign policy failures, they range from opposition to military programs that brought down the Soviet Union to opposing the Osama bin Laden raid.
So when I found out the topic today, I read the entire transcript of the Face the Nation interview with Robert Gates. And in it, he criticizes Donald Trump strongly on China, on Russia, on Iran, on North Korea, on Venezuela.
But we're not talking about President Trump. We're talking about Biden.
But when you're talking about Russia and what Gates says about Russia, he doesn't say anything about Biden with Russia. In fact, he says he agrees with Biden on Libya. He agrees with Biden on Egypt. What he says on Russia is that Donald Trump is trying to prevent Congress from sanctioning Russia because he knows Russia helped him in the election and he doesn't want to stop them from helping them again. That's the bombshell here that you didn't say from the interview.
But our topic
and it's fascinating to read that.
Okay, but our topic, let's go back to Biden and his foreign policy and whether or not he'll be held accountable for any of his foreign policy blunders, which Gates did point out. He also talked about some of the military mistakes that he's made. What about that?
What Gates says is that in his memoir of 2015, he criticizes Biden on several things. And then the interviewer asks if he stands by that statement. It's interesting. Read the interview. He says, I don't know. I think I stand by that statement. And then he talks about he agreed with Biden on Libya. He agreed with Biden on Egypt. He disagreed with him with some technical points on Afghanistan. Look, Gates is a Republican, but he's a Republican who says he doesn't know if he can support Donald Trump as the Republican nominee because he lays out all of Donald Trump's foreign policy mistakes. So I really think you need to read the entire Face the Nation interview to get a full context of what Gates believes.
So, Kelsey, just the final word on Biden, since that's what we are talking about in terms of his foreign policy.
Again, I think that his foreign policy, he served as chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee in the Senate. He ran for president on his foreign policy platform, and now he's touting it once again. And he really needs to ask, name a success on the foreign policy platform, the world stage that you and the Obama administration actually had. Gates was criticizing him looking back for decades. Again, we don't need to look back for decades. Just look at the Obama administration compared to where we are now.
What about dismissing China? I mean, do you think that any investigation is forthcoming in terms of Hunter Biden and how he has profited from China specifically? Kelsey?
I think it absolutely should be investigated. If he's running for president, his records, his profits in that matter should be investigated, especially when he makes these strange comments suggesting that China's not competition right now.
And Mark, I'll give you this. I mean, he did say that at least Biden does have foreign policy experience, and he hasn't heard a lot, if anything, from any of the other potential Democratic candidates who are running in terms of foreign policy at all. We're out of time. Sorry about that.
He also said Biden had integrity, which made a distinction.
All right. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, the time now is about 20 minutes until the top of the hour. President Trump put the pressure on GM, and now workers at their Ohio plant will keep their jobs. Can he do the same for coal miners? Our next guest explains how the president's good policy can help rescue the Rust Belt. Welcome back. General Motors putting hundreds of Americans back to work in its Lordstown, Ohio plant, largely thanks to pressure from the president. But with 2020 looming, the White House could be on the verge of a major bipartisan victory for millions in the Rust Belt. Here to explain is Daniel Turner, president of Power the Future. Thank you so much for coming in so early. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Used to seeing you on Late Night with Tucker.
Yes.
So this is the complete opposite.
I can do all hours for Fox News.
So this is great news. Let's take a look at the facts by the numbers for you as we get started. Nearly 100,000 coal miners at risk of losing some pension money by 2022. We had 1,600 coal mining jobs that were added under President Trump through April of 2019 as well. So let's jump to that first.
Yeah, the coal industry was targeted for political reasons by the previous administration. The war on coal that President Trump talks about is a real thing for political reasons, for ideological reasons. Groups like the Sierra Club, billionaires like Michael Bloomberg targeted coal.
And we know Hillary Clinton. We remember that moment when she went there.
Yeah, and she told coal miners in Pennsylvania that she was going to put them out of business. And then she was surprised that she lost Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. So the coal industry has suffered tremendously. And there was a bipartisan piece of legislation to save the pension of these coal miners. And normally I wouldn't be in favor of a taxpayer bailout of a pension program. But this is a case where it was our government under the Obama administration that put coal miners out of work and put their pensions at risk. And I think we need to make that right.
So what about this Lordstown plant? What is happening with that?
Yeah, this is another example of how this president likes to see jobs stay in rural America, doesn't want them outsourced either to Mexico or to China. And so this GM plant that was closing, 1,700 people were at risk of losing their jobs. And he intervened and he negotiated with the GM president, and the plant was sold. And actually GM announced that they were investing several $100 million into the state of Ohio. I don't think he's doing this for purely partisan reasons or political reasons. He cares deeply about workers. And if you're a rural Rust Belt worker in Ohio or a coal miner in West Virginia, it's great to have a president on your side.
So how do you think this will play out in terms of the election moving forward?
I mean, when you look at these swing states that President Trump won in 2016, that he will need again, and we're talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, it really does come down to jobs. And to see a president who cares about manufacturing, cares about energy workers, cares about rural America, I think they're going to vote with their wallets.
So in terms of the unions, though, will they, throw their support behind President Trump?
There was an interesting phenomenon in 2016 where union leadership felt obligated to come out and support Hillary, but the members secretly said, well, we're canvassing for Hillary.
It's already happened with Biden in terms of the firefighters union.
Exactly. So the leadership may choose the Democrat nominee, whoever that's going to be, and that's traditionally where they go. But the members, the ones whose jobs are on the line, when they see a president fighting for them, whether they're coal miners or any type of energy worker or in manufacturing, they're going to vote accordingly.
It's all about jobs, and the president keeps bringing it.
Exactly.
So, all right. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
All right. Come back, please. Well, the time now is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour. Big Pharma under fire. The legal battle underway after prosecutors say that drug makers conspired to raise drug prices up to 1,000%. And Google leaning left. New evidence that the search engine's top news results all have one thing in common.
For your right!
Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. At Fox Business Alert for you now. Stock futures falling as China is expected to retaliate against higher tariffs the Trump administration just imposed. Tracy Carrasco from our sister network Fox Business here with what we can expect. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. We are seeing a major sell-off this morning. Dow futures now down by more than 300 points. S&P 500 futures, NASDAQ futures also pointing lower. You can see on your screen losses of more than 1%. Ahead of the opening bell. This, of course, after the president's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said last night that he does expect China to retaliate against the higher tariffs that the administration imposed on Friday. These were the tariffs of $200 billion, raising those tariffs to 25% from 10% on Chinese imports. The president also saying he was in the process of raising tariffs on an additional $325 billion. So he tweeted, of course, over the weekend about the developments with China. Here are a few of the tweets, but we'll be watching those futures very closely this morning. Of course, any further developments on these trade tensions with China.
Probably get a couple more tweets today.
I imagine.